I think we're live.
Wonderful.
Welcome, welcome.
Welcome. Good morning.
I
Good
thought we were.
afternoon.
I thought we were out of the.
Good evening. Good day.
Good evening. Good day.
What did you think we were out of?
I thought we were out of winter,
I know.
and then it decided to do a little snowing yesterday.
Spring was around the corner
Right?
until.
Yeah, it's actually really cool though. We've been living in big cities for a long time, so being able to see now a little more foliage has been a real treat.
Definitely. Well, we
Seeing the
went to
buds.
college in a place where we were completely surrounded
Yes.
by nature, so that was so.
Yeah, that was upstate New
lovely.
York, and the spring there didn't really start until May.
Yeah.
And once it started, I mean, it could be chilly out, but by our standards,
Everyone's in shorts. Everyone's in their summer fair.
You're getting on the grass.
Yeah. You're
Yeah, yeah.
excited that spring has sprung.
Exactly.
So it's all relative.
It definitely is. It definitely is. And look, it is still April, so I'm
Yeah.
not going to make too big of a fuss.
Exactly. Well, April showers bring May flowers, so the saying goes.
And the May flowers are here. I mean, we got a lot of flowers already.
Yeah.
So.
And also some groundhogs coming out.
Yeah, we got some
kinda cool.
wildlife,
Yeah.
which is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, all of that being said, many of us are actually, I think if you're not on the front lines, if you're not soldiering about and helping save the world, so to speak, you're doing your part by staying at home.
Which is also saving
Which
the
is
world.
also saving the world,
Yeah.
absolutely. And a lot of times I think we're becoming more aware of the fact how much we need social interaction, how much that human connectivity is so vital to our well-being. And when we can't experience that firsthand, be it in the form of face-to-face communication, regular get-togethers with friends and pals and coworkers, there seems to be a void. And there's this kind of emptiness that we start to feel.
Yeah.
Isolation,
I heard it,
loneliness.
The podcast, I was listening to my trusty Peter Attia, Dr.
Yeah.
Peter Attia podcast.
If only he knew
The
how
Drive.
much you
Oh, I mean, I
appreciated
can
his
assure
work.
you, I mean, there are plenty of fans out there.
I know.
I'm one of legion. But the thing he was describing it as this this sort of sense of malaise.
Yeah.
And he was talking to a psychotherapist who's a good friend of his, and the psychotherapist identified it as a lack of morale.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's in part due to the lack of social interaction that we're having, but it's also just that feeling that we're having. A lot of professionals, psychotherapists, psychologists are describing that actually what we're feeling as grief. And so in order to sort of, get back on track mentally, I think what's important is to really make a conscious effort to, if you have an internet connection, which if you're watching this now, you're lucky to have, then you can have social interaction. It won't be in the form of social interaction that you might be used to with face-to-face. Greg, we're not 6 feet apart here.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
Yeah. Well, anyway,
Yeah.
but yeah, we still respect that if we have to, go to the grocery store or anything.
We are living together.
I know. I'm just, yeah. But anyway, that's the topic for today because it's so important to, even in the absence of face-to-face communication, we still need that social interaction.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, if you think about how suddenly this happened, you start to realize why we were caught off guard psychologically, right? Let's not talk about right now the sort of bigger governmental decisions and institutional decisions, but just psychologically, we as individuals were caught off guard by this.
Yeah.
And to go from a fully enriched social life into the most intense isolation that we as society have experienced in living memory. It's no wonder that we're struggling. And what I liked about the video that you put out earlier this week was it was kind of like a, you know, when you're working out, sometimes you wake up and you're like, you know, I don't really want to work out today.
Sure.
And then if you do that the next day, it's even harder to work out. And then it gets to a point where you're like, you know, I'll work out when the sun comes back out. You start making excuses and it gets harder and harder to actually do it. I think the same thing happens with social skills.
Yeah.
Right? And
I'll make small talk tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
I'll you know, I have that call, I'm gonna put it off, I'm gonna cancel it because I'd rather watch the show. Or that starts to happen, and you start to get sort of pulled into this even more dramatic isolation that's in many ways self-imposed.
Yeah, definitely.
And I like what I liked about your video, getting back to that, is that it challenges you to do the opposite.
Yeah.
Right? Instead of giving in to that temptation to recede into yourself.
Yeah.
And receding into yourself is different than introspection.
Totally.
We can be clear on that.
Yeah.
Because introspection, you know, we've talked about it a lot. That can be a very therapeutic and beneficial process.
And it's actually like at the end of your introspection session, your mind is, you know, it feels just like it's worked so hard.
Yeah,
right?
engaged.
It feels engaged.
And it wants to share your sort of epiphanies with other people.
Right, and you might feel tired after that, which are all good things because it shows that you actually, you know, did the work of introspection. But
by contrast, receding into yourself is more so this process of it's a compounding effect of isolation.
Yeah.
And one sort of choice toward isolation versus socialization begets another, to a point where suddenly you're cooped up, you're not reaching out to anyone, and you don't want to get to that point.
Yeah.
And part of that process is keeping your social skills strong.
On point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't only happen when during periods like this, but also, you know, when you might have just like a nasty stomach bug and it's very run-of-the-mill and you just can't engage with anyone. But it could also be when, you know, it's deep winter and you're maybe in a remote location, you're, you know, away from society. Or it could also be when you're in a different society and you don't know the language yet, you don't know the culture yet, you don't have any friends yet. Notice how I'm saying it, yet, because you will get those things.
Right.
We were both abroad in college, and I remember when I first went out, I went actually to Turkey on a Fulbright in the beginning of my sort of career, I would guess you could call it. Yeah, right out of college. And you went on a Princeton fellowship out of college.
Very rural China.
Very rural China. And
sort of border of Tibet.
Right. And so we didn't have friends yet at the time when we just went out there. So in the beginning, it definitely felt a little, it could have been isolating, but I think we were both very proactive and we made friends. We immersed ourselves in the community. So we had social interaction. So these are all important things to do in times like that. It's not just for now.
Right? That's an important point. Periods of isolation can crop up, and you might not even really identify them. At least what we have in this situation is a clear sort of top-down government-mandated isolation, right? It's obvious that we're being isolated. There are definitely periods in your life, experiences that you go through that are isolating, and you may not have expected it to be isolating, and you may not even realize at the time that they're isolating. And I think your example is a very good one. I did feel isolated in real China. I mean, there were people around me, but isolation doesn't necessarily have to require you to not be around people. Isolation, social isolation, is more so about, it's a psychological state of mind. And it says, it's basically your mind saying, I'm not able to connect with other people.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Like there's this moat between you and everyone else. Yeah. That's what we're talking about here. And that can happen in a crowd. There's what's that famous line? I got from Gatsby. I hate small parties. There's no privacy. I love large parties. They're so intimate.
Yeah.
Right? Because, and maybe it's the other way around, but in terms of the order. But that's the idea. When you're in a crowd, the woman in the story was saying that felt intimate to her, because when you're in a crowd, it actually is isolating.
Yeah.
You know, you can blend in.
You can disappear.
You can disappear.
Right? You
That's
can
it.
be incognito, and it doesn't even have to be a masquerade ball, right?
Right. Yeah.
But I think, yeah, exactly, right? These are different situations and scenarios, even states of mind, where we might find ourselves folding in on ourselves and becoming more of a recluse. But the problem with that is that, as you touched upon, social skills are a muscle, right? And if we don't practice our social skills and our communication strategies, then that muscle will atrophy. And so the next time you're out in society, or you're at a networking event, or you're at your friend's party, and you notice you're having some anxiety around just, you know, saying hello to a friend of yours, or making a little bit of small talk, or telling a story where people are seated around you, or you're, you know, at a dinner party. If you're finding yourself, you know, in those kinds of tense situations, then that means that we have to work on something, right? And that's okay.
And you can experience that. You can think of yourself as a relatively socially adept person, but even professional weight trainers, when they step out of the gym for any period of time, their performance goes down, right? So even the best of us is going to experience situations like this. And it's what's great is that it's not a permanent state, right? Your social skills are always modifiable, right? They're always there's always the ability to improve them, to strengthen them. There's no sort of upper limit where it's like, okay, my social skills simply can't get any better. So I think that's important to recognize when you start to focus on, you know, developing them and also strengthening them.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, everyone is socially awkward to a certain degree, and everyone has a social skill or a communication strategy to improve upon. We're not all, you know, just born, you know, speaking so eloquently and having amazing social skills. And so I think that recognizing what might be some of the weaknesses in those two specific areas, communication and social skills, we can really, you know, do ourselves a great service, and the people that we interact with a great service, by honing those skills and sharpening them. Because not only are you going to become more confident and communicative and have more empathy because you're communicating with people and, you know, you're having that human connection, but you also make the other person you're communicating with feel good as well.
Yeah.
Right, Greg?
No, and that makes sense.
Sorry, you were drinking.
But you're right that good social skills, honed social skills, have a dual benefit of both helping you engage in conversation and helping the person to whom you're speaking engage in conversation with you. It's funny. I was thinking of other situations where I would feel rusty with my social skills. Yeah. It can even be like a vacation. You know, vacations can be pretty isolating sometimes, where it's just maybe you and your spouse or partner or children even,
siblings,
But the point is, you become very sort of, it's just you as a unit going around a very often foreign environment. So there isn't the typical routine. Yeah. You're not engaging with colleagues. You're not engaging with friends other than those in your immediate vicinity. So even that, everyone knows that feeling when you come back into a situation that's lively and social, and you're like, whoa. I feel a little bit
that
like
was a little weird.
I just jumped into a much faster lane of traffic.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, I also, one of the funny things I remember from sort of last summer we had a bunch of friends' weddings, and they were all in these beautiful remote locations. Our friends decided to do destination weddings, which is really fantastic and a lot of fun. But we had been, you know, sort of in our studio, in our office, probably like 24/7. Prior to that, we were just working really hard, kind of holding up in
That's
our
right.
office spaces
Yeah,
and, doing what we do for Explearning. And when we got to these places, I mean, we made so many friends, but I think the funniest part was that we talked so much because we had been starved, right?
That's a really good point. It's something to look out for, actually.
Yeah, we would talk to each other, obviously, but, it's different when you're making new friends and meeting people and you have to sort of tell them what you do and what your interests are and sort of ask about them.
You feel like the words start pouring out of your mouth, and you realize at that point that's a good indication that you probably were a little socially starved.
Yeah, I mean,
it happens.
So I think there's a balance, and I mean, if you love what you do and you do what you love, that's amazing, right? And good for you. And I feel like we're in that boat, and we're lucky to be in that boat. But I think this is a great opportunity to carve out some time to really work on your social skills. And that might sound a little confusing and antithetical because you're like, wait, MD, excuse me, I'm in my home. Like, I can't,
Yeah, what are you talking about?
How am I going to do this? Well, like we said before, internet connection, right? That's amazing. Not everyone has an internet connection, so I think, you're lucky. And two, you can, text message, you can Skype, you can Zoom. Skype, who does that anymore? Zoom, right, guys?
Gotta be a
Zoom. Zoom, you can message.
Skype just never worked that well.
I know.
Skype just never worked that well.
But it was the first.
I
right?
wanted it to work. It was. And it wasn't always owned by Microsoft, but even pre-Microsoft, it didn't work that well.
Yeah.
But it was all we had.
Right. And so now I'm seeing on social media people sort of like humble bragging about they have like 10 people in their Zoom, 30 people in their Zoom party. They'll do a screenshot.
Yeah.
People there was recently, so Passover celebrations, right? I see the Seder's, and they put that out, and it's kind of...
Your mom discovered the split screen in WhatsApp has
very cool.
A video chat
I didn't
feature
even know that
you can split screen with multiple people. I'm sure a lot of our listeners are like, guys, what are you talking about? I mean, come on, this is basic stuff.
So you can do multiple calls.
But it is incredible. It is incredible. But the point is, even if you don't have an internet connection and you have a phone, most of us do, and I think your point was a very good one, which is sometimes when you are outside, sometimes the best opportunity to work on something is when you're outside of your normal routine.
Yeah.
Where in a typical day, pre-pandemic, you're in the office, you're
at the coffee shop,
out with friends.
Yeah.
You're being so social that you don't necessarily think about being social.
Yeah,
it's just happening.
Happens.
When you are isolated and you are looking for opportunities to be social, that itself is an opportunity to think about it in a more meta way. You step back and say, what does it mean to be social? How am I being social? What aspects of it do I miss? And when you start to go through that thought process, and start to sort of analyze being social in a more structured way, that's a great time to make improvements, right? And to take your skills to another level.
Right. So I think one thing to do here is to sit down quietly in whatever space you're in and think about what are the things that come to mind as something that you struggle with. And if you don't really know what that might be, run through a couple of social scenarios, and they could even be, a phone call. That's still social, even though there's some distance there. Think about, would you get butterflies in your stomach? Do you, start sweating? Do you feel uneasy? Lack confidence when you think about those social situations, like small talk, maybe storytelling, like I mentioned. That one's a big one because when everyone's looking at you, and you might not be on stage, but you might be crowded around, a dinner table, and everyone's on you. And, if you hiccup or something, then suddenly someone else is going to jump in.
Or give away the punchline too early.
Give away the punchline too early, right? So everybody has these different things that they can work on. So you have to figure out what it is that you might want to spend time honing and sharpening.
Storytelling's a great one.
Yeah.
I think. That's one of those things where you call someone up and say,
guess what happened?
Guess what happened, right? You can, if you know that storytelling is something that you want to work on.
Yeah.
And it really, most of us do want to work on storytelling skills. It's one of the most important social skills, and it's built into
our DNA.
The social process, right? Storytelling for centuries, for millennia, was used to convey history, to convey cultural knowledge, right? So it's a great skill to work on.
To teach children
even
morals.
If you're good at it.
Yeah.
To teach, the next generation.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a perfect example of where you can say, okay, I'm going to think of a funny story. It might have been something that happened last night.
Right.
It might have been a wacky dream, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Here's a story. I'm now going to start easy. Call your best friend or your parent, right? Someone who's really easy to talk
sibling,
to. And spin the story.
Yeah. And then ask for feedback.
And then ask for feedback. Yeah. Absolutely.
Because we need some corrective feedback in order to understand, what might have been better said or whatnot. Or it could be something like you want to work on your hand gestures and your nonverbal communication. Okay, in face-to-face communication, that's very clear that we can do that. But in a Skype call or a Zoom call or a FaceTime, you still have this much, to show, right? So why not try to work on, some of the hand gestures you might be trying to improve upon.
Right, and in that context, what you could say, or in that scenario, you could start by, again, reaching out to someone who you're close to and say, I'm going to stand a little further back. I feel like a lot of people, particularly with friends, the camera's way up in their face.
Or it's like this.
yeah. Maybe because they're in their underwear. But you zoom out, right? And say, I'm actually going to stand back a little further, and if you don't mind, I wouldn't, it'd be great if you could sort of follow my body language and gestures, because this is something I'm working on.
Yeah.
Turn it into an actual tutorial.
Yeah.
And it's two birds with one stone, because one, you get to have a nice conversation with your friend.
Absolutely.
And two, you get some constructive feedback on something that you're working on.
And it could even be something like posture, right? I feel like this is something that
posture is my biggest challenge.
We all work on.
Yeah.
So it could also be something like, hey, can you look at my posture while I'm talking to you? Am I hunched over? Am I, let me know how I'm doing. But believe it or not, I was a couple months ago, because we've been socially isolating. I talked to somebody, and they were probably Gen Z. So what is that? Early 20s, thereabouts. And they were telling me that they are petrified of making a phone call. They do not want to get on the phone, even to make reservations at a restaurant, to make a hair appointment, to call the doctor's office. No. So
I have to be honest. I have that fear too.
Really?
I'm not.
But we grew up with the telephone. But still, see, that's case in point, right?
I don't know. I didn't as much.
Really?
Yeah, I was more so I was always an email guy.
Greg, but what about when we were 8?
I wasn't on the phone at 8. Were you on the phone at 8?
I'm trying to think.
Except my grandmother, maybe.
No, not at 8. Not at 8.
Right? By the time
but I would call up after school. We'd get home.
And the U.S. was better with phones.
Yeah, because you grew up abroad.
In Asia, so I grew up in Hong Kong. We were already using instant messenger.
Yeah,
right?
that's
So
true.
I was more accustomed to that kind of thing.
That's true. I do remember having an instant message too in grade school. Anyway, the point is that the phone can be really terrifying for some people, and if that's the case, if you're raising your hand right now, which is fine, then try to call somebody. First, start with, like you said, somebody that you're in close proximity to. Somebody then who might be a little bit maybe a business partner, or somebody where the stakes are a little bit higher in terms of you doing a good job and getting your communication points across and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, it's my former boss was good about getting me to push through this fear of mine, because he was always telling me, don't get off your computer and just call the person, right? Just call them.
Yeah.
Just call them. In fact, we're working on a lesson right now that we touch on that. It's probably not going to come out for weeks, but the point is getting on the phone with someone. Stay tuned. Getting on the phone with someone is the best choice when you look at your selection of options.
Yeah.
Because it is more immediate, it is more intimate, and there's a lot more information conveyed.
Yes.
And so it's a great fear to get over.
Yeah.
Right, if you can.
Definitely.
So what were you suggesting then in terms of overcoming that?
Well, I mean, I would practice. I would really practice. And if at first you don't want to, let's say the phone call is the thing that you want to work on, you should plan out what you might want to say, right, ahead of making the call. So kind of give yourself some prep time. I know it sounds strange, but you want to feel confident that you can make that call, and you want to think about how you're going to convey the message, even if it's a story you want to tell, or you wouldn't believe what I learned. I'm taking this online course, like learn about this, whatever.
Have a purpose for the call.
Have a purpose.
Yeah.
So if you want to script that out with just some bullet points, I'm not talking verbatim, then pretend like you're on the call, and maybe videotape yourself, take your phone and videotape it, maybe audio record it, and then analyze it and see, well, okay, I could have done this better. Maybe my, intonation was a little bit off here, and then actually make the phone call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's part of the fear for me is that I'm interrupting them, that somehow they're so busy, and for me to call them is like this rude or intrusive thing. The reality is most people like that interruption.
Yeah. It's welcome.
It's welcome, right? The opportunity to chat with another person, whether it is business or personal, most of the time, particularly I feel like in times like now.
Yeah.
But in general, most of the time, people enjoy having a conversation. There's less and less of it these days because so much of our communication has shifted to digital and specifically sort of written email, collaboration tools and so forth.
Yeah.
The opportunity to speak to someone is kind of a nice one. And I have to remind myself of that when I feel reluctant to place that call. Because the truth is, I'm probably not an inconvenience. It's more likely that I'm a welcome diversion.
Definitely. Yeah, and they want to hear from you.
Right.
Maybe they were waiting for that call.
Yeah.
The other thing, you can think about is not necessarily the communication channel, like a phone call, having a phone conversation, but the person that you are going to telephone, right? So maybe there's a former coach of yours, or a relative, or somebody who's in a different generation than you, and their main channel of communication is the phone. That's what they're used to. They don't do instant message. They don't do Snapchat or FaceTime. Maybe there's some anxiety around, I haven't spoken to that person in ages. How can I reach out to them? Is it going to be awkward? Is it going to be bizarre? So that might be something that, you might say, well, I could work on that. That would be a great thing to hone. Because the reality is that right now when everyone's home, like you said, people want to hear from people.
Right. So there's no better time to reach out to someone that you may not have reached out to in a while.
Exactly. It could be years, right? Maybe this is an old babysitter of yours or something.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So just think of it that way. But I think really taking the time to think about different things, like even active listening, right? Anything that comprises communication and social interaction, you can still do social interaction from your couch.
If you're struggling to come up with a topic, just check out our blog.
Exactly.
There are a bunch of different skills I think that you could work on.
Right, and so treat those, right? Go through our blog. We have hundreds of lessons up at this point. So go through, look at something, whatever catches your eye, and treat that as a challenge or a quest, a communication quest. I think that's what we should call it, right?
I really like that.
A communication quest, and you are embarking now on this journey to complete the mission, right? So let's say it's active listening. If you're home with family, go and sit down and have a conversation and be a proactive listener, right? Not a passive sort of, I'm kind of listening, I'm also on my phone, and I'm thinking about what to make for dinner or something. Really be active. And then
listen to how they're saying it.
Yep.
Listen to why they're saying it.
And then ask questions. Ask follow-up questions. I think a lot of times we just want to like talk about ourselves, right? We don't, especially I think with people that we might take for granted, like family members, siblings, things like that, and you don't really know the person as well as you could. So ask them these poignant questions. I think they'll really appreciate that, right?
I agree. And a thought occurred to me. We always are relating social skills to muscles training, right? But I think there's it's not a but. I think there is a really strong connection here in terms of overlapping disciplines within, or overlapping competencies within communication. Because, for example, when you're trying to improve your bench press, right, which is where you have a bar with the weights and you're lying on your back and you push the bar up, right? The most obvious way to improve the bench press is to bench press, right? To just keep lifting that bar. The equivalent here would be to say, oh, I want to work on my public speaking, so the most obvious thing to do is give public speeches. Okay, but there are a variety of other ways you can improve your bench press, right? You can do push-ups, even things like pull-ups, things that strengthen your supporting muscles. You use your back muscles, you use some of your shoulders, so you can maybe do some lat raises. So there's a variety of supporting muscle groups that you can work on that will improve that sort of more central skill that is your bench press. It's the same with social skills, right? If you want to improve public speaking, maybe by working on your storytelling skills, maybe by
your posture,
right? All these other side skills help refine the bigger picture of your social aptitude more broadly.
I love that. That is such a great analogy. It's all of the supporting muscles that you also need to work on.
Right.
You always tell me about push-ups or like pull-ups. Let's go with pull-ups because that's sort of what I'm working on right now.
Pull-ups are very difficult.
So difficult.
If you do a nice clean pull-up from full extension all the way to full contraction, that's a tough thing to do.
It's insane. But it's important to work on the things you want to work on. And so Greg always tells me that it's not just about just what he said, right? It's not just about trying to do that pull-up form. It's the other things that you can be doing, like your lats. Is that what they're called?
Yeah. Strengthening your lats.
Your
just hanging, right? Just
grip.
Strengthening your forearm, your grip. Right.
Anyway, so these are, we make these analogies. Yes, okay, this is not a fitness channel, but we approach communication holistically, right? And so if we can come up with these analogies, I think that will resonate with some of you, then why not?
Yeah. So I think the main takeaway here is periods of social isolation, A, can feel isolating, and B, can trigger a process that makes you feel even more isolated and less socially capable. But with a shift in mindset, you can actually turn it into an opportunity to develop your social skills and develop them in ways that you don't normally do or have time to do. And I think you've come up with a huge list of great examples. That's not a comprehensive list. There's many other ways and directions you can take it.
And if you have suggestions, comment below. If you want a video, comment below.
Yes.
Let us know, seriously.
Tell us.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you guys do have thoughts on it. But the point is, as we've brought up over the last few weeks, these difficult times provide opportunities to do things we don't normally do and to get better at things that we otherwise don't have an opportunity to improve.
Right.
So we should take advantage of that.
Yeah.
This won't last forever.
But your social skills will.
Your social skills will. Those are for life.
Yeah.
And so, seize the day and make the best of the time that you have.
Lovely. Couldn't have said it better myself. So that's a wrap on this live stream. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you're watching later, hopefully you enjoy it later as well. And have a look at the blog because there are some suggestions there. I'm getting all tongue twisted. But also check out the other lessons because I think that'll give you a really good understanding of what you might want to be working on during this time as well.
Yeah.
So that's a wrap.
All right. Have a great weekend.
Yep.
And we will catch you next week.
That's right.
Yeah.
For another lesson and another live stream.
Yeah.
All right. Happy Explearning.
Bye-bye.